Hey everybody, I'm meteorologist Sean Rowland here at WeatherWorks. For about 24 hours from beginning to see effects of Irma across Florida, what we're going to do in the next few minutes is start talking more direct impacts and what we're looking at wind, rain, and coastal flooding wise across the state. I know a lot of people in the Northeast and Midwest may have family members or friends that have moved to Florida, and we're going to talk a little bit more in terms of specifics as we go through this weekend. Irma remains a powerful hurricane here. The key points to watch for as the storm moves west-northwest is that turn that we begin to see later on Saturday into early Sunday. The slight change that we've noted from yesterday is a location that no longer is forecasted to be along the east coast of Florida. We're looking more along the central and western part of the state where the hurricane makes landfall. It's a small mileage difference, but it likely will have big impacts in terms of what we're going to see across the state. Let's start out with the rainfall. The rainfall is going to be significant across Florida, mostly 8 to 16 inches, and that will lead to a lot of inland flooding that we're going to see through the weekend. Second part of this is the strong winds, and our main area of concern with damaging winds will be in the Florida Keys. Everybody should be evacuated from the Keys. Peak winds of 130 to 150 miles per hour, and a lot of locals that have been down there for 50, 60 years are concerned this might be one of the worst hurricanes that the Keys has seen in a generation. Now with that westward shift, unfortunately that does bring a lot of areas like Fort Myers, Naples, Port Charlotte, into the 110, 120 mile an hour range for wind damage. And everybody should make sure that they're in shelters or in a safe place during the core of the storm, which will be during the day on Sunday, starting the pre-dawn into the evening hours. In terms of the East Coast, we're still looking at 100 mile per hour wind gusts, and that's because the storm is so large. It is a very massive hurricane. But one thing I do want to point out, a little bit more of a westward track, and some of these wind speeds here on the East Coast will be a little less than forecasted. The east side of the hurricane is something to monitor though, because that is a favorable location for tornadoes. Anyone that followed Hurricane Harvey knows that the east side of the hurricane did produce several tornadoes and some were damaging. So that's something to keep in mind all up and down the East Coast here of the state. Lastly, you head further north, Tampa, Orlando, they're in line for 100 mile per hour peak winds as well. Anybody that lived through Hurricane Charlie in the Orlando area, those were 100 mile per hour winds and knows the kind of damage that that produced. Finally, we take a look at the storm surge, and this is a very significant concern across the state, especially with so many built up areas all up and down the coast. Again, I talked that this is a large storm, and that means there's a big push of water that's going to happen. So regardless of the storm's location, again, we have a good big push of water that's going to lead to high storm surge, especially in the southwest part of the state and the east part of the state. And that's where we have continued northeast winds and then southeast winds as the hurricane moves north. So anybody in coastal locations that are under mandatory evacuations certainly needs to listen to those local officials. Now, as we go through the rest of the storm, we'll continue to be active on our social media platforms, and we'll be with you through the weekend.